I think we have been very lazy as an industry for many years, not just through the digital revolution and now the communication revolution. And it's something I've talked about in other contexts, that the industry of publishing and the industry of the supply side of that, the photographers, have been very lazy. They've fallen into formats and templates, both of what is regarded as newsworthy and interesting, the manner in which those stories are told, the audiences that we're trying to reach. I think we've fallen into a pattern of trying to walk in established footprints, and that has made us lazy. I think there always have been innovators within the industry, and I think now is the moment for those innovators to really expand. The opportunities are there for all of us to test and explore and do many different things. I don't think there's any one solution. But yes, I think we have been lazy. And the analogy, which is very common, is to talk about the horseless carriage. That 100 years ago, when the automobile, the internal combustion engine, emerged, people described the automobile as a horseless carriage. In other words, they defined it in terms of a previous technology. And I think that's where we're at now, is that we're trying to define our practice in the terms of 20th century technology and culture, and we haven't yet learned what it actually is. It is very different. It's not the same form of journalism at all, let alone the same audiences and the same expectations. All of this has to be defined, and it's not only a matter of being lazy, which I think many of us have been. I think it's also a matter of just learning. We need to move with culture. We can't move ahead of culture, otherwise we'll be isolated and speaking to nobody. I think that the pricing question is normal. I think that there is an oversupply of imagery. I think that there's not enough individual, strong content. There's too much generic material, and all of that sort of leads to the pricing pressures. I think also tied to that is, I think this is part of the paradigm shifts that we need to embrace as we move forwards, which I'm actually very enthusiastic about, is to move away from the notion of pricing photographs by license or by day rate. And it's something which I see across culture, not just in photography, that the notion of packaging and selling intellectual property in units is evaporating. That it's the way in which we access intellectual property, whether it be books, novels, literature, movies, music, or photographs, or any form of this, I think has to shift to a different paradigm. And that the old days of saying, here's an image, we can control the license and negotiate fees per license, or here am I, hire me for a day rate. These units of pricing, I think, are decreasingly relevant as we move forward in the 21st century. And certainly one of the things I've been doing with VII is trying to redefine the product. And the product, which was photographs, I think is now something else. And for VII, I've defined that product as integrity. What is really valuable is the credibility of the journalists that I'm working with. And it's that credibility that people are willing to invest in, rather than necessarily licensing units of photographs. And I have now a very real string of projects which have been monetized on the basis of the integrity of the journalists, rather than licensing a fixed number of pictures. And I think that this is part of what we all need to do, is we all need to look at ourselves and see what is it that we actually have that's of value. We can see that the unit price of the pictures we're trying to sell is going down. There's nothing we can do to fight that. We can hold our prices high and we'll starve. We can sell them cheap and we'll starve. But as long as we're locked into that model of what we're selling is a license, I think we're going to be in trouble. But the value is still there, and I think it's up to each of us to define our value. I define the value of VII as being integrity. There are other values too. I think for other photographers and other agencies, there are different values. So I'm not prescribing integrity, saying this is what you have to sell. I'm just saying that for VII, this is a very valuable asset. It's a way to think differently. And coming back to VII the magazine, you can see there that as it's structured at the moment, we're not selling the photographs, but we're creating value on the photography and on the interest that the photographers hold for the viewers. So one of the things we're trying to do very actively is not just show stories, but to introduce, to bring the viewer closer to the story by having the photographer mediate in every way, which is talk about either their experience or the issues they covered, so that the photographer's voice as well as their images becomes part of the interest. And that's another area where VII is very lucky, is that part of the, these are smart photographers. They're smart and they're articulate, as well as being able to make great pictures. So it means that they have a very rich offer to make. They're not exclusively about photography. I think that we need to open our horizons also when we talk about multimedia, and that, sure, I think multimedia is part of where we're going. I'm very taken at the moment, obsessively maybe, with the notion of transmedia, which is something I've discovered relatively recently. And just to describe that, crossmedia is a term we're all very familiar with. And crossmedia is where you take a photograph or a project and you put it in many different places. You publish it as a book, you publish it in a magazine, you have an exhibition, you put it online. But essentially it's the same project, it's the same material, but in different places. That's cross-media. Transmedia is an evolution of that, and a very interesting evolution, which is not to repeat the material, but to start with a single strong idea, but then express it differently in different media according to the strengths of that media. So a book is very different from the internet, so they shouldn't replicate each other. The experience of reading a book should play to the strengths of a book. The experience of seeing a project online should feed on the strengths of working online. Likewise, exhibitions, magazines, social media, mobile, all the different formats that we have. And so what I'm very excited about is this notion of transmedia, which is adapting one's message to the most appropriate medium. Now that might mean it's only a book. It just exists as a series of still pictures with printed captions underneath it in a fixed sequence. It's a book. Or it might involve audio and graphics and all many other elements, which becomes multimedia in some format or other, which should probably be online or on an app, on a mobile or such like. So I think rather than having the format define the way in which we work, which is what a lot of photographers do, by the way, in many ways, is they allow the format to determine the way in which they tell the story. I think we should be looking for the most effective way to tell the story, and then find the formats that are appropriate for that form of storytelling. So in that, multimedia plainly has a place. But to make multimedia the goal, I think it's like saying, I'm going to work in black and white forever. If that's the best thing you can do, and the only thing you can do, then great. I don't knock it. But to say that should be really the only thing you can do, I think is misleading.